This is the Impulsive Thinker Podcast, a show for high-achieving ADHD entrepreneurs. Together, we will inform and educate you about how to improve your self-awareness while developing systems, routines, and habits for conquering the entrepreneurial world. Here is your host, André Brisson.
Hey there, it's André, the Impulsive Thinker. This week I was talking to Mike Zorns about always be the buyer mindset with your clients. And once we hung up, we started talking about his dyslexia and my severe ADHD, especially my short-term memory. And I recollected a statement that Don Barden mentioned on the podcast was his advice to everyone was learn how you learn. And I started to expand on that. And Mike felt that I should probably share it with you guys, how I start to learn, how I figured out to learn, how I learned. And because of my short-term memory being very, very poor, I didn't realize that in high school, I had a high school co-op supervisor. I thought he was a pain in the butt. He was military background. He was rude. He was mean. But you know what? I owe him a lot of credit for this because I don't think if I would have had his influence, I'd probably be in a different state right now or a different ball game for me, because what he enforced was his whole team to use logbooks. And that's where my logbook habit came to be. And it's something that's enforced and required in my company, that everyone has a logbook, all notes are taken, who they talk to. And anyways, I'm not going to go with the details of the logbook, but he was actually checking my logbook weekly and made recommendations on what not to put in and what to put in and what was missing. Because we were working quite together. And once I got done with that high school co-op term, I went to university. Then I had university co-op terms. And I think the first one I walked by, I saw there was a journal in the stationery outfit. And I asked if I could have it. They said yes. So I took it. And from that on, I've had a logbook for me for everything that I've done, everything that I'm thinking about. And so basically my whole career is documented. And for two things, as a professional engineer, that can be used in court of law, depending on court cases. But at the same time too, it was my strategy to overcome my executive dysfunction of short-term working memory. And so, because we were talking, 7 numbers, I've said this many times. There are 7 numbers in a phone number because it's easy to remember 7 things for the neurotypicals for most people. ADHD, neurodivergent people. For me, I think it's 3 to 5. And I have to keep repeating that information in my head until it's written. So I always have a logbook with me. Every time I meet someone, I have a logbook so I can take down notes. I take down notes as I'm doing a podcast interview so I can remember stuff later when I'm doing the show notes or I'm doing a summary at the end of the episode, because I will forget it. So the other thing too was with the logbook, short-term memory, I never realized that, actually I learned this pretty late in university, that I cannot sit and listen to a professor and take notes. So my strategy there, without realizing, was I sit there and listen because I want to make sure I can understand it. And I knew I could read the textbook and learn from it. So I take notes if I can take notes from the textbook, or I made arrangements with people in my class that they took the notes and I was, they did that. I helped them solve a lot of problems. I was good at solving problems and figuring out complicated stuff. Now, the other thing too, hindsight's 20/20, and I do this and I keep doing this to this day. And today I still do it without compromise and without apology. People tell me it's a waste of time. You should get someone else to do it, blah, blah, blah. No, why? Because this is how I learned. This is how I learned. So university, I never realized hyperfocus was the only reason I passed my exams, because I did not do much work. I got involved in a lot of stuff, go all the time. And then come the final exams, I would sit down, I'd get up, no matter how late we were out the night before, get up, be at the classroom wherever we decide to study at 6 a.m. And I'd sit there and read. I'd be there 18 hours straight. I would read the textbook, front to finish, or at least the relevant chapters that we needed for the exam. I would highlight what I thought was important. Then I'd finish reading. Then I go through the highlights. Then I realized there's a lot of highlights that were repeated. Then I would actually write down the main points that are important from all those highlights, and I wrote them down. And I did not realize at the time, because I did not understand about short-term memory or working memory and long-term memory. What was happening when I was taking from the highlight to the handwritten notes? That was the process of me learning and then staying in my long-term memory that I can remember. So while I was doing this, everyone else was working in groups. It had to be a big communal thing for them to learn and socialize, but I could ignore them because I was hyper-focusing. Then they would interrupt me when they couldn't figure something out. And when I would go over and help them figure that out, I didn't realize that that was how I was learning as well. I didn't know what I was doing, but with my ability, my unique ability to just process things and look at it a different way, I can get to the solution with a group of people quicker than they could, not understanding where to start. And that was one of my skills. I really knew where to start and how to start and which theorems to do. So the transferring of information by hand onto a piece of paper was ingraining in my long-term memory. And me helping other people learn and discussing with them, it was actually ingrained in my head. And now I'm just realizing now the more I talk about stuff, it stays more in my long-term memory. So it's not only reading, transferring, taking notes. It's also having the discussion with people about a theorem or whatnot. And as long as, what was good with engineering, everything's repetitive. We got the basics, and then we can take formulas from there, and that's repetitive. So I don't have to keep remembering new stuff. The basic theorems are all the same, and I just derive stuff from there. And that was the other thing for me to learn. I didn't have to remember as much because I only learned the basics, what I call the first principles, and then I know how to derive stuff from there depending on the situation, while everyone else was memorizing all million options available, and I could not do that. That's why I refused to do biology in high school, because it was all memory. I could not, it was not a practical thing or applicable. It was just memory, and it would not work for me. So even to this day, when I go to conferences, I read books, I highlight, and I transfer that into OneNotes. Okay, into good notes that I can legible, because my handwriting can be pretty crappy. But for me to retain it and to become an expert, so I can remember, I need to do this transfer, that I'm reviewing my notes, I'm putting it into words, I will expand on it or identify things I need to learn more about. And that stays in my mind. And guess what? I feel at peace because it's still trapped somewhere. I don't need to feel I need to remember it all because I know where to find it. That opens up my memory. My working memory is free to take on better stuff because I feel confident the information I need to know is somewhere. And that's how I figured out I learned how to learn, is I need that process. Yes, someone can take my chicken scratches and transfer it to OneNote for me and save me time, but I'll never remember the conversation or the discussion at the conference or the webinar because I didn't take that step to transfer it over. It's nice to be caught in the trap, save time, blah, 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 but make sure it's the right stuff that you're freeing yourself from. I cannot free myself from this because I don't learn if I don't do this myself. And it's okay. And in my mind, it's okay because that's how I learn. And for you, how do you learn? Have you figured out how you learn or thought about it? Because I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that you do it's probably, for people, a lot of people ridicule me about it, and I don't care about it anymore. Is there something that people say, hey, that's kind of weird you do it? Do you need to do it? Pay attention to those kind of statements and what you were doing at the time. That's the way you learn, and I'm pretty sure you've got a unique way of doing it. Figure it out and stick to it, and don't be apologetic about it. If you want to share with me how you learn, I'd love to hear how different people learn differently, because that's what I like to do here. Share it with me, and you can email me at andre@tacticalbts.com, or you can send it through the website at tacticalbts.com. I would love to hear how you learn differently. So, as always, thanks again for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Impulsive Thinker podcast. If you enjoyed it, subscribe, rate, and review the show. It helps us get discovered by listeners like you. If you can share it with at least 2 other people, that would be greatly appreciated. I want to gift you the Shit List. It's a weekly planning tool that I developed to plan my week and focus my time. You can find it at our website at tacticalbts.com. That is tacticalbts.com. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Impulsive Thinker podcast. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion for the show, please visit theimpulsivethinker.com. The Impulsive Thinker podcast is produced by Tactical Breakthroughs and hosted by André. Remember, ADHD is only a part of you, not all of you.